On April 20th, 2022, Nicole Lenway Ford was gunned down in a shocking act of violence, right on a sidewalk, in broad daylight, at a busy Minneapolis intersection. The crime had none of the hallmarks of a robbery or random act. It was deliberate. Surveillance footage would later show a masked assailant stalking the area, keeping just out of view, before charging in to carry out what appeared to be a premeditated attack. At the time, Nikki, a 33-year-old crime scene investigator with the Minneapolis Police Department, was living a demanding yet fulfilling life, balancing a career in forensic science with raising her 5-year-old son Callahan. Nikki had been part of the department's forensic team, the real-world equivalent of a CSI, solving violent crimes that tore through the city. But while she spent her workdays analyzing scenes of tragedy, her personal life had its own share of turmoil. Back in 2016, she'd had her son with Timothy Amateur, but the relationship between the two had since fallen apart. As is common in these situations, they battled over custody and parenting schedules. Meanwhile, Nikki had moved on emotionally. She was now dating Minneapolis police officer Donovan Ford, a relationship that had begun amid flashing police lights and crime tape. That spring evening, Nikki drove to the 3000 block of University Avenue to pick up Callahan after a supervised visit at FamilyWise, a parenting center. Timothy was inside with their son when Nikki arrived shortly before 7:30 p.m. As she stepped out of her SUV and made her way toward the building, an individual cloaked in black, with a hood, gloves, and medical mask, sprinted across the parking lot. Just seconds later, the figure raised a gun and fired. The first surveillance camera only caught the beginning of the assault. A second, stationed across the intersection, caught blurry footage of the attacker standing over Nikki and firing again, before bolting back in the direction they'd come, even as cars passed by. Miraculously, despite being hit multiple times, Nikki managed to get up. She first attempted to get help from inside the FamilyWise building, but when that failed, she dialed 911. During the call, Nikki realized she was badly wounded, possibly unable to speak because of her injuries. Thankfully, a passing motorist, Emily Clancy, saw the horrifying scene unfold. She pulled over, rushed to help Nikki into her car, and took over the emergency call. Emily applied pressure to a neck wound until first responders arrived minutes later. Nikki was quickly rushed to a hospital, still alive, but in critical condition. Emily later told police that she'd seen the shooter run up behind Nikki and hold something to her neck before firing. The gunman fled as Nikki staggered. On the sidewalk, investigators recovered 3 spent .380 shell casings and several live rounds. At the hospital, doctors discovered Nikki had been shot through the arm, and a bullet to the neck had punctured a lung, among other severe internal injuries. While medical personnel fought to stabilize her, detectives turned to surveillance footage. A 2022 black Dodge Ram had been spotted repeatedly passing by the area before parking just down the block. The attacker had emerged from this truck, loitered around the lot, then disappeared behind a fence on the side of the building to wait. Once Nikki arrived, the hooded figure launched their attack. Afterward, the shooter was seen fleeing the same way, back to the truck, which had no license plates and no distinctive features. Inside the FamilyWise facility, officers located Timothy Amateur, who had just finished his scheduled visit with Callahan. As night fell over Minneapolis, investigators began piecing together what appeared to be an attempt on Nikki's life. A cold, calculated ambush that left a devoted mother and seasoned crime scene expert fighting to survive.
Are you Timothy? Okay, right now, I'm going to ask you if I can search you for weapons real quick, okay?
For weapons?
Yeah.
I've been here the whole time. I don't know what happened out there.
Hennepin County Police brought Timothy Amateur in for questioning shortly after the shooting, hoping that Nikki's ex might have insight into who could have wanted her dead. Investigators were searching for any clue, any potential lead, and thought Tim, given his close connection to Nikki, might offer something useful. Instead, much of the interview focused on Tim portraying himself as a victim. He spoke at length about how the family court system had treated him unfairly, how the Minneapolis police had supposedly targeted him, and how Nikki had, in his words, contributed to his troubles. When detectives asked him directly if he had any idea who might have tried to kill Nikki, Tim didn't hesitate. He said, "Absolutely," and pointed to her line of work. According to Tim, the attack had to be connected to Nikki's job with the Minneapolis Police Department, where she worked as a forensic scientist. He claimed that the nature of her work could have easily made her enemies. He also mentioned that Nikki had recently expressed concerns about being followed. She believed someone might have been stalking her, though she hadn't identified who.
She was afraid because she thought people were driving by her house. She changed her last name to her middle name. She shut down her social media. She had a drone of Minneapolis coming through her house all the time. She had me bring over my shotgun to her house. She was in fear.
Timothy Amateur had nothing further to offer investigators that night. After questioning, officers drove him back to the family-wise parking lot so he could retrieve his Jeep and head home. As a precaution, authorities conducted a search of the vehicle before he left, but they found nothing unusual or suspicious at the time. The very next day, despite the severity of her injuries, Nicole Lenway regained consciousness in the hospital. It was a miracle she had survived. The bullet that struck her neck had passed dangerously close to a major artery. Doctors confirmed that if it had deviated by even a fraction of a millimeter, the outcome would have been fatal. Though she was unable to speak due to her injuries, Nikki could still communicate by writing. What she told investigators left no room for doubt in her mind. She believed the person behind the attack was Timothy Amateur, the father of her son. He was the only individual she knew who had both the motive and the capacity to orchestrate such a violent act. However, investigators quickly encountered a couple of major complications. First, staff at FamilyWise confirmed that Tim had been inside the facility with Callahan at the exact time of the shooting. That meant he couldn't have physically pulled the trigger himself. Second, there was a significant inconsistency between Nikki's written account and what eyewitness Emily Clancy reported. Emily had believed the shooter was male, but Nikki was adamant that her attacker had been a woman. Though she couldn't name anyone specific, she was absolutely convinced that whoever carried out the shooting had done so on Tim's orders. Nicole Lenway had first met Timothy Amateur in 2012. At the time, she was attending classes at his gym, where he was a well-known taekwondo instructor. Their connection was quick, and the two began dating seriously not long after. Eventually, Nikki moved into Tim's house in St. Paul. Known as Master Amateur to his students, Tim was 8 years Nikki's senior. Over time, his behavior shifted. He became increasingly controlling and eventually both emotionally and physically abusive. In 2015, Nikki made the decision to leave. She packed her belongings and moved out. Just a month later, she discovered she was pregnant. Nikki's professional life continued to flourish. She was building a strong career with the Minneapolis Police Department, and in 2016, she gave birth to Callahan. The court awarded her full custody, largely based on her claims of Tim's abusive behavior, including an incident where he allegedly dragged her back into his house by her ponytail when she tried to leave. Although shared custody arrangements were eventually made, things took a turn once Nikki entered a new relationship with Minneapolis officer Donovan Ford. Tim's possessiveness reignited. He began pushing for more time with Callahan, launching repeated complaints through both family court and child protective services. At one point, Tim even accused Donovan of sexually abusing Callahan, with Nikki supposedly allowing it to happen. These allegations were thoroughly investigated and ultimately deemed baseless. In fact, Callahan later told authorities that his father had coached him to lie in order to spend more time with Daddy. Tim didn't stop there. He also filed criminal charges against Nikki, claiming she had run over his foot with her car. She was taken to trial for assault, but was swiftly acquitted by the jury. Eventually, Tim's visitation rights were scaled back to once a week under supervision. Those visits took place at FamilyWise on University Avenue, the very location where Nikki was later ambushed. Back in 2015, shortly after Nikki had moved out, Tim invited another woman to live in his home, 18-year-old Colleen Larson. Colleen had been one of his taekwondo students since she was 12, and moving into his spare room was said to be an exciting opportunity for her. It placed her in close, daily proximity to a man she had long admired. According to friends and neighbors, their relationship soon evolved beyond teacher and student. Though Colleen saw herself as Tim's girlfriend, others described her more as a live-in servant, someone who cooked, cleaned, and even helped care for Callahan during her years in the house. Even by 2022, Colleen remained closely tied to Tim, continuing to refer to him as Master Amateur. After the shooting, family-wise employees told investigators that if the attacker was indeed female, Colleen Larson might be someone worth looking into. This led police to obtain a warrant to search the home Tim and Colleen shared in St. Paul. Several firearms were recovered during the search, though none were the exact .380 caliber pistol used in the attack. However, multiple discharged .380 shell casings were found in the residence. Forensic testing by the Hennepin County Crime Lab confirmed that those casings had been fired from the same gun used in the shooting, a major breakthrough. Investigators also discovered that Tim had failed to disclose his full list of vehicles. When officers had driven him back to his Jeep on the night of the incident, he led them to believe that was his only vehicle. But during the follow-up investigation, he admitted, "No, I have a Dodge Ram too." Authorities learned that Tim actually owned 4 vehicles in total, including a 2022 black Dodge Ram, purchased earlier that year in January. A perfect match for the truck seen on surveillance footage circling the parking lot before and after the attack. When confronted with the video evidence, Tim denied that the Dodge Ram in the footage was his. He argued that it couldn't be his truck because his had 2 Superman decals on it, which were not visible in the surveillance images. Still, the mounting evidence suggested otherwise, and investigators were now building a stronger link between Tim, Colleen Larson, and the attempt on Nikki's life.
What do you mean?
This is your only car?
No, I have a Dodge Challenger too.
So I'm gonna be the first guy you guys look at.
This is a picture right here.
That's not my truck. Those pictures were not pictures of my truck.
Surveillance footage taken the day after the shooting captured Timothy Amateur's black Dodge Ram, now sporting a temporary license plate and the Superman decals he had previously mentioned to officers. What raised red flags for investigators was the timing. Tim had applied for a new custom license plate on April 19th, just one day before Nikki was shot. He claimed he replaced the old plate immediately and insisted he had never driven the truck without a tag, despite the fact that the shooter's vehicle had clearly been missing any visible plates during the attack. Confirming whether Tim's Dodge Ram was the same truck used in the attempted murder turned out to be a relatively simple task. Investigators discovered the vehicle had built-in Wi-Fi, which allowed them to obtain a warrant for the truck's GPS data. With that information in hand, law enforcement was able to reconstruct its precise movements throughout the day of the shooting. They also pulled cell phone location data for both Tim and his girlfriend Colleen Larson, which helped complete the picture. About 3 hours before the attack on Nikki, both Tim and Colleen were seen together at his gym, the World Taekwondo Academy in White Bear Lake. That's when the two swapped vehicles. Tim took the Jeep and headed to Family Wise for his scheduled visit with Callahan, while Colleen left in the Dodge Ram. She first returned to their shared home in St. Paul, then later drove to the parenting center on University Avenue, the site of the shooting. After the attempted murder, the same black truck was seen traveling back to St. Paul House via a similar route. Surveillance cameras positioned along the way picked up footage of a woman matching Colleen's appearance behind the wheel. Even more telling was video collected from a KFC drive-thru not far from the scene. It showed the Dodge Ram with no license plate and no decals, exactly how it appeared in the surveillance footage from the attack. Investigators concluded that the decals and plate had been added the next morning in an effort to disguise the truck's identity. During a follow-up interview, investigators asked him to list the firearms he owned. Initially, he failed to mention any .380 caliber handguns, but when pressed, he admitted that he had previously owned 2.380 pistols. That omission became more suspicious when Colleen Larson was arrested and charged with first-degree attempted murder. The evidence against her was overwhelming. She was seen on camera, tracked by GPS, and lived in the home where shell casings matching those found at the crime scene were recovered. At first, the case against Tim was considerably weaker. While everything seemed to point toward him as the one with the motive, there was no direct proof tying him to the planning of the crime. Until Colleen began to talk. In her police interview, Colleen calmly confessed, "I took the truck over there and then I shot her." When detectives asked whose idea it was, she hesitated before saying, "Tim's." Asked more directly, "So Tim asked you if you felt comfortable. Would you shoot Nicole?" Colleen quietly answered, Yes. She spoke in a soft, subdued tone, clearly uncomfortable, and seemed hesitant to fully implicate Tim, the man she had long admired and trusted. But Colleen also revealed that Tim had fed her the same lies he'd used in court and with CPS, that Nikki and Donovan were abusing Callahan. The difference was, Colleen had believed every word.
And I wanted to help the little man.
Colleen told investigators that she had no idea what happened to the gun after the shooting. According to her, once the attack was over, Tim handled everything else. He took charge of getting rid of the weapon and covering their tracks. While she admitted to pulling the trigger, she insisted that Tim orchestrated what followed. Based on her confession and the growing mountain of physical and digital evidence linking him to the plot, Timothy Amateur was formally charged with first-degree attempted murder as well.
According to court documents, Larson hid behind a fence here at the Family Wise on University Avenue. Once the victim got out of her car, she ran up from behind and fired a few shots into her neck. Part of the attack caught on these surveillance cameras. Amateur allegedly harassing and stalking the victim over the last few years. Just a few months ago, investigators say he even offered a friend $50,000 to kill her.
During Timothy Amateur's trial, the defense opted not to call a single witness, and Tim himself chose not to testify. Despite this silence from the defense, any doubts about whether the prosecution had proven its case were quickly put to rest. The jury deliberated for only a short time before returning with a swift and unanimous guilty verdict. By the time of the sentencing, Nicole Lenway had married her longtime partner, Officer Donovan Ford, and was now known as Nikki Ford. She appeared at the hearing to deliver a statement but asked that her face not be shown in any video coverage of the proceedings. As the judge prepared to announce the sentence, Tim Amateur faced the very real possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars.
It has been over 5 years of threats and harassment, preceded by another 5 years of mental, physical, and emotional abuse. I fear for the day he is ultimately released. He will not stop. He is self-serving, and I know losing this battle will only fuel his rage further. I fear for anyone who stands in his way, as he has the unlimited capacity to cause chaos and destruction to those he deems as adversaries. I ask that the court protect not only me, my son, and my family, but all of the others that could suffer from his past and future fury.
Even after his conviction, the Taekwondo instructor remained unrepentant. Timothy Amateur continued to maintain his innocence, insisting there was no real evidence tying him to the attempted murder. He portrayed himself as a target, someone who had been wronged by the legal system, the family courts, and law enforcement. In his mind, he wasn't the perpetrator, but a man caught in a web of injustice.
Over 100 witnesses listed, and not one person could say that they saw me do anything. Me and Mr. Reed still to this day question why I'm still sitting here. It's obvious that Miss Lenway got shot. I'm not denying that. If we make him look like a bad guy, he must be a bad guy.
I will note for the record that you have not taken any accountability for your actions. You've shown no remorse.
Timothy Amateur was ultimately sentenced to 18 years in prison for his role in the attempted murder. Just 2 weeks later, Colleen Larson entered a guilty plea to attempted murder as well. Her decision came without the benefit of any plea agreement. At her sentencing hearing, the focus shifted away from just the crime itself and toward the deeper question of influence. Specifically, how much responsibility lay with her former mentor. Much of the discussion centered around how the now 25-year-old Colleen had been groomed and manipulated by her 42-year-old Taekwondo instructor, a man she had trusted since childhood.
She still believes now all the lies that Amaker told her.
Sure, she's younger than him. Sure, he's charismatic and manipulative, but he's not a sorcerer.
Despite everything, Colleen Larson remained steadfast in her loyalty to Timothy Amateur. After entering her plea, she admitted that the decision to kill Nikki had been hers alone, made 2 weeks before the shooting took place. She revealed that during that time, Tim had made comments suggesting life would be simpler if Nikki were no longer around. In that imagined future, Tim and Colleen could marry, she could legally adopt Callahan, and the three of them would finally be a family. Colleen claimed, however, that Tim had no idea she was going to act on those conversations. She insisted he was unaware when she took his truck to the Family Wise Parenting Center and carried out the attempted murder. At Colleen's sentencing, Nikki Ford also addressed the court. she shared her heartbreak and sense of betrayal, not just from the attack itself, but from the person behind it. Nikki had once believed Colleen was a kind, well-meaning young woman who genuinely cared for her son. She never imagined the same woman would one day try to end her life.
She has admitted her intent and her eagerness to follow through with such violent and traumatizing actions that fateful day. She stood over me, which felt like only inches away, continuing in her attempts to end my life, even pursuing me after I fled from her. She has even admitted she had every intention of killing me. Admitting guilt was essentially her only option. In her own words, she wasn't manipulated into such actions and wanted to do this on her own volition. In either instance, manipulation or her own initiative, it's terrifying. She's either easily coerced into taking a stranger's life based on a false reality and lies, or she truly wanted to. I have been informed that she is still in contact with Tim's inner circle, still communicating her love for him, even expressing she wants a future with him. Even today, almost a year later, she remains steadfast in her love for Tim.
Yes, Mr. Amaker is the one who conceived the plot. He's the one who had the very strong motive to want Miss Ford dead. But it was Miss Larson's actions that put it into play. Miss Ford is alive not because Miss Larson abandoned the plan or the plot to kill her, but because Miss Larson was unsuccessful.
Timothy Amateur has since filed an appeal challenging his conviction. Oral arguments in the case were scheduled to be presented in early April 2024. As of the time this account was published, the appellate court had not yet issued a ruling or opinion regarding his appeal.